annihilated them all.
What, the cats as well?
No, he hasn't. He hasn't killed the black cat yet. No.
Black cats are meant to be lucky.
Well, the black cat that ripped the hell out of my arm. Yeah, I'm not. I don't want any more of that again. Right. Okay, then we have started. So any news? Because Pete loves cats. He really does, and he likes my bandana. Blimp, 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 the pixie. Right, Pete. Pete looks happy for once. He's usually a miserable sod.
Oh,
Thank you for that.
Uh, yeah, yeah. Peter, you never need to thank me for calling you a miserable old sod. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It goes without saying. Right, Pete, anything you want to say, lovely?
No, I haven't been out. No.
Right, okay. I didn't really want to know whether you've been out or not. Right, okay then. Andy, you're after Anne. Go on, Anne. What would you like to say? What would you like to tell us? Other than the fact that, your love life is going really well. You've moved in with your love of your life. Everything's fine.
It's not. I'm wrong out because this house sale has just gone on and on and on. And I seem to have been. I went to sleep because I've been out all day sorting stuff out and got very tired. So I'm sorry I was late.
The problem is with a modern house sale, it does take a lot to sort out.
Yeah.
He's on there, Andy. Good. Yeah, they do. Our heart goes out to you. It really does. Right. Okay. Andy, let's have some news from you to sort of pad this out a little bit. Anything from you?
No, I haven't got anything. I went to Scotland last week for the day.
Oh, you just went to Scotland for the day. That's fine.
Yeah.
Just don't bother us. Tell us about it.
Yeah, well, it was just a family thing about spreading my cousin's ashes and that. Which, by the by, we actually had a really nice day, nice chat with everyone. And my brothers keep promising to take me to Burns Walk, which is very near them, of course, just outside Dumfries. So, and his mate from the council was the guy that was the archaeologist who did all the work on it. So, the controversial work, shall we say?
Oh, now come on!
Well, that's the one where all the ballista shots were found, and they
right.
reckoned by the spread and the way they were laid out and all the rest of it that it actually was not used as a training ground, that it was actually attacked. So,
that was the one that Roger mentioned last.
It was, yeah.
So, yeah.
Which would be really interesting, but it's still a kind of a controversial argument. I think he's one of the few that is arguing that one, but he could well be right because he's right on everything else he's found so far. He's had a good career, that guy. He also found a Viking hoard, which was a pretty spectacular one that had some carved crystal, which they thought, oh, well, that might not be. That might have come from Syria, until they managed to get it apart and looked at it, and it said something like, made in Northumberland, literally carved into it. So of Northumberland. So it had to be done here, which it's never been heard of before. So that's pretty spectacular. So, all him, yeah. He does a bit of reenacting, I think. I'm pretty sure he's got a long ship, small one.
Oh, yeah, just a long ship in the garage. Yeah, that's fine. Don't worry. Don't mind.
Yeah, it's kind of like an 8 or 12-seater one, or that. It takes it pretty serious. Looks a bit like a Viking too, from what I remember.
Have you been smoking something?
No, it's all true. That Andrew Nicholson, is it?
I don't know. I thought you were talking about your brother.
No. He's not an archaeologist. No, he's a landscape architect. Works in the same office in Dumfries and Galloway Council.
Yeah.
But I met the archaeologist a couple of times when we were out on things. So I'm pretty sure it's Andrew Nicholson.
Nice then.
Well, I don't know him that well.
Yeah, it'd be. Yeah, it would be a bad introduction, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it could be. Could get a bit embarrassing. Yeah.
Okay, Claire would do anything to be in that guy's life. Right. Okay.
What I'll have to do is I'll have to get in touch with my brother and say, you could arrange for Andrew Nicholson to come and show me around. That would be great.
It would, yeah.
And Claire will go with you. Yeah, that's just not a good idea.
Like he's got nothing else to do. Yeah. I think he's married. So he's,
no, that's not
don't go down that one.
go there.
No, no.
No, yeah, it's just it's so bad. It's so yeah. Even Michelle's worried about me going up to Cumbria just in case I bump into Claire again. Right, okay, Margaret.
No, I've got no news.
Okay, okay. David, we're so pleased you come on because there's a few away today. It was a bit empty without you, Dave.
No, I lost everything. Thank you very much, Andy. Thank
Pleasure,
you.
mate.
I've lost everything so many times. Anyway, good to have you on, David. Right, I wanted as many of us here as possible. I know Roger's away. I know Dreena's away. Dreena's given her apologies. Peter was in touch this week as well. He's going to be on tomorrow. Adam's having the same problem as you, Anne, moving.
Yeah.
He's having a nightmare. He's moving from Colchester to Wales, which is even worse. Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's complained that somebody nicked the hubcaps off his car, but that's not unusual.
Oh,
I wonder if he visited Barry or not.
It'd
Right, okay.
It's funny if
So,
he was in the same same chain, wouldn't it?
yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, exactly. Right, okay. Yeah, right, just a few announcements really. One's for Peter. So, Peter, if you don't know it, the last Wednesday morning is tomorrow. And I'll explain everything tomorrow. Now, there's somebody else also wants me to use some Welsh words today because they're learning Welsh. And they watched this and they said, put some Welsh words in there so I can learn some Welsh. How to pronounce some Welsh words like Owen Glyndŵr, Ymad o hyd, which means we're still here. Bona dar, Prynhawn dar, Nostoes dar. So there's a few bits of Welsh words. And Lloyd George, but that's not a Welsh word at all. He's just a Welshman. Can you remember last week I mentioned about the Mould Cape and I mentioned about a Reverend Clough whose document I need to get hold of. And I don't know if it's in this class or another class. I said that the document was going to cost me £200 to get hold of. And I said, well, I'm going to see what I can do. Anyway, that evening, Michelle went on the computer. She said, oh, there's a copy of the document here. And it just wasn't really, just thought, okay. So I was nattering away. I think it must have been on Wednesday. And I said, it would be so good if I could get hold of this. Anyway, the next day I had an email off somebody who watches us on YouTube. And they said, I'm sending you a check for £200 to get the book.
Wow.
Very good.
And what's very good about it as well is that I'm gonna give the book to the printer, right? And I'm gonna say to the printer, because it's out of print now, it's 1836. I'm gonna get proper photocopies made of that so I can actually show it to you. And also the copies of the pages we're gonna have blown up to A2 size so that we can use them in the live show, which would be absolutely brilliant. But I can't do that with just a small sort of rough thing that's online because it just wouldn't reproduce. It's not the same thing. The version online is not the original text, and the version online doesn't have the references and stuff. And I thought this was absolutely brilliant. And the woman is actually called Margaret, but so she's not Margaret Poole though.
Well, we are very generous as Margarets.
She's Margaret Lake. She's Margaret Lake.
Are there any fabulous, amazing books that you would really, really like? Because I might have one or two in my library.
Well, I do need to come up there, and I do need to probably grab some of those books and start moving them about. But yeah, there might be. I would need to think that one out. I'd need to think that one out. So anyway, I thought that was absolutely brilliant. That I would tell you that there's lots of really good people out there, and that demonstrates it. So thank you for those who actually watch on YouTube. They make a big contribution and they make donations and all the rest of it. So they do their bit. So let's crack on with this. So I'm gonna say this. There's something in it today for Peter, tomorrow. It's about Dartmoor, but
I won't be there tomorrow.
What's that?
I won't be there tomorrow.
Right, Peter. So what's going to happen next week? It's Wednesday morning. It will be replaced by Thursday evening. right?
Okay.
Which would be like a focused hour. Oh yeah, I've got to mention this as well, that those of you who might be interested, on a Thursday evening for 1 hour, I mentioned this last week, we're looking at lots of bits of history in Wales and so on that have been distorted and not factual and so on. And one of those things will do a little bit more detail on the Mould Cape, as well as when I do get all that information on the Mould Cape, when I do get the book, which will probably be in about 2 weeks, I will we'll do that as well. So anyway, more about that in the break. So I really believed that I'm going to do something on the Iron Age that is like a site, and I was going to look at different areas to do with an archaeological excavation on an Iron Age site. And I thought no. And the reason why I thought no is I got to give the spirit of the Iron Age. I was actually going to do iron mining today, which is actually what I'm going to do next week. So that's what we're going to be doing, iron mining next week, which obviously if we're doing the Iron Age, it's good to do iron mining, right? But I want to sort of differentiate the difference between the Iron Age and the Bronze Age and all the other periods straight off. So it's in your head. And the only way I'm going to do that is with about 40 images that are just about to come up now. So let's just do that. And it'll paint the scene. It'll paint lots of the trees in the background. And this is a time in the Iron Age that they're really suffering for what happened in the Bronze Age, with various different climate changes. They're all black and white images, but you've got quite a few there. But we're going to start off with this image. Right, and the reason we're going to start off with this image, we'll go back on the other ones. We're going to start off with this image, and we're going to actually say straight up that when the Bronze Age is about 3,000 years ago, and we've got like 150 years before we get to the Iron Age. So the Iron Age, in some people's minds begins roughly about 850 years BC, so 2,850 years ago, or 2,800 years ago, somewhere around there, right? Somewhere towards the end of the Iron Age, somewhere towards the end of the Bronze Age, I should say, the climate gets cooler and wetter, and it gets wetter in the upland areas, like Snowdonia, like the Brecon Beacons, like Cumbria, like the North Yorkshire Moors, like Derbyshire, and Dartmoor. And the change is not so much a change dramatically in temperature. It's a change very much with the cycle of weather. And this is one thing that climatologists don't really mention. They usually say, oh, the temperature is going to rise 1.5 degrees, or the temperature is going to rise 1 degree, and all this is going to happen. You can have temperature rising and going down, and nothing happens, right? If temperature goes down or up in the Sahara, it's not going to make any difference. But what you have to have is all the other elements. Andy mentioned the El Nino the other week, and this is the year of the El Nino and all the rest of it, and it was just like if we can think about the Atlantic warm waters, and we can think about various other things going on. So it's not just really about so much a rise or lowering of temperature, it's about everything else as well. So Dartmoor itself, in many respects, like the other areas that we've mentioned, Cumbria as well, like the other areas we mentioned, it turns into a blanket boggy landscape because of the cooler and wetter areas. And we've already discussed the landscape that has been denuded of trees for various different reasons. And what we're seeing is that in these upland areas, settlements are abandoned, farm landscapes are abandoned. And it only took a little bit for the landscapes to be abandoned, simply because that slight change in temperature, the increase in rains, becoming cooler, different wind directions, loss of trees. It only takes a little bit for there to be a catastrophic collapse across the British landscape. I'm thinking of this catastrophic collapse in the British landscape. The northern areas of Britain see an overwhelming catastrophe caused by other events. And we've mentioned these other events, such as the volcanic activity associated with Mount Hecla that begins in the year 1159 years BC and continues through the end of the Bronze Age into the Iron Age. And with these occasional bursts, all you need is 1 year of prolonged clouds of volcanic dust at any time, blocking out the sun, and that would have a dramatic, catastrophic effect on anything below it. Because you've all heard of the statement, we're only 2 or 3 weeks away from societal collapse. Well, back then, if your crops failed, you were in a situation of collapse because there were no Lidls, no Tesco's, no Booths. And this whole situation with what was happening, this great exodus of people's movement, an animal movement, that all of these changes in the north particularly would block out the sun, causing low pressure and temperature, resulting in extreme high rainfall and cold weather all over Scotland and northern England, are very much seen over the rest of Britain as well. When things seemed to settle down was coming into the 600, 500 years BC, at which point lots of these upland areas, I was looking at this wonderful tall obelisk on Dartmoor, but one of the things you can see is that this whole, this is a play of a microcosmic direction that we see for abandonment of sites from the end of the Bronze Age into the Iron Age. So what's now happening? People are changing their ways. People are making different directions in the way their life is going. So when we see the difference between the Bronze Age and the Iron Age, we see the monster of change very much with us. I'm thinking I just thought that one thing that might be useful is to try to see that in lowland areas, they were starting to develop settlements, defended settlements with a ditch and a palisade. What's all this about? With large buildings coming from in the Bronze Age into the Iron Age, and then gently but surely, as we'll see some images today, these create the defended, banked and ditch sites and the hill fort sites, which are synonymous with the Iron Age period. For whatever reason, they're building these banks and ditches around these settlements towards the end of the Bronze Age, going into the Iron Age. Could be said that we know, could be said that we don't know. But one thing to be enclosed is to feel safe. I don't know if I expressed this when I was building this house. I've said it a number of times. Before there was a roof on it, before there was floorboards down, when there was just posts sticking out the ground, right? I felt going from the outside of the field inside the posts, there was a sense of safety. I've got nothing to worry about here. I could be attacked by a wolf or a fox. But even the sense of being enclosed by posts with gaps in between them, there was a sense of place. There was a sense of connectedness with the place that I'd created, even though there was no real building here at that stage. Dabbling and understanding this period is very, very important. I mean, in the upland areas of Dartmoor, these types of settlements were being abandoned on Dartmoor. Just walled enclosures, and we're thinking within these there would have been people's homes, there would have been people's gardens across Dartmoor. And again, trying to get a fix on this, trying to look at what this landscape was like. Hang on a minute. What we find across Dartmoor is in the Bronze Age, as the Bronze Age sort of decays into the Iron Age, what we do see is that they try to make efforts to build walls and boundaries across the landscape. They tried to build settlements. They tried to bring the landscape alive, but there's only so much you can do before the earth that you're trying to sow seeding actually becomes redundant for growing crops. Do you know, I've been digging in my own field today. I'm digging another souterrain, a habitable souterrain underground, right? And what I've just dug through the glacial moraine, and it was just above that there was rubble strewn across the field, and I thought, it's very difficult to have crops even here, and there's actually at least some soil. Within this Bronze Age, lots of the soil had been washed away and had ended up in different streams and rivers. And this is Dartmoor, a play on the larger areas of the landscape. So lots of these upland areas. When you think about Dartmoor being an upland area, it is upland compared to the low-lying areas of, say, Penzance, or the low-lying areas of Plymouth and so on. But again, what we do see is that this is from an earlier lecture, you could say. But what you can see is that over a moment from Plymouth over to Oakhampton, what you can see overnight, those areas that are synonymous with stone circles are areas that are now abandoned, and all of these things that these people understood are things that they no longer understand anymore. And what they're allowing into their minds are new things that they can understand. Remember, when archaeologists are talking about these types of landscapes with these old monuments and so on, at one stage they've got to turn around and they've got to think, we're leaving all that behind. We've just got to go. We've got to leave our ancestors alone. And that would have been very difficult. So when we think about, again, when we go back to that image, stone circles, and we go back to these images, we think 1 minute, 1 minute is all this wonderful landscape that they've invested a lot of time on it. The next minute they've got to go. They just got to go, right? And some people might say that when they've got to go and go into the lowland areas, it's causing conflict. But then again, it's not, because they're just occupying areas that nobody lives at that stage. But as populations grow, then you're going to have conflict. And this is what we see in the Iron Age. Conflict starts to come through in the actual evidence in little bits and pieces throughout the Iron Age. People ain't around killing each other every 5 minutes in the Iron Age, but there is a sense of contraction in their ability to understand the landscape, and they're getting a little bit more sort of defensive in a way. And what we start to see is that also when we move on to this, it goes back to the other image. It's just come too soon a minute. So people start to get a little bit more defensive, and they start to feel that building in this way is the new. And when we say it's the new, when we, for example, when 1 minute we don't have the pandemic, then the next minute we have the pandemic, and after that there's a new world, right? And I remember talking to somebody today. I'm still struggling being able to adjust from the life I used to have to the life I've got now, right? And the pandemic was a big part of that, right? And when you feel like this, these people are the same. They're going from what they knew to a world that is new, from what they knew to a world that is new. So if we think about, if we go to this is here for a reason, what we're actually starting to see is things start to get bigger, and things start to get more connected. And we're showing boats, and when we're showing boats, again, that sense of connectedness, they're able to travel, they're able to move around, and they're able to trade. So one thing we saw last week were the objects of Must Farm, and the objects that indicated that they've got trade with Iran somehow. Somehow goods are coming to the Peterborough area from Iran. And we've got, for example, amber coming from Scandinavia. So that's all going to need boats and transport and connection. And into new lives, into a new lifestyle, a very, very busy lifestyle. It seems in many ways that this next illustration is brilliant because it shows everything I need to show. It's almost as if when we're illustrating the Iron Age, it's almost as if we feel we know more about it. It feel that we've got more of a sense of connection, and it's almost as if people are now going from that old worldy like landscape, like those upland areas into the lowland areas, and there's more farming. There's greater ability to farm, and the greater ability to farm as the Iron Age comes to us is the ability to see iron as being the material of choice. You can have iron plowshares that ain't going to get blunt too quickly anyway. Yeah, you can have iron swords that you can readily sharpen, and they're going to be very sharp. Things become very sharp. Things get sharper than they have ever had been. Obviously, flint is going to be still around us, right? But when you can create something like flint, but in iron, there's something in iron that you can melt down and reshape. You can't do the same in that way with flint, right? And when you look at bronze and the Bronze Age, and bronze isn't as strong, and is quite a poor material when you're going to use it as a plowshare, for example. So reconstruction of an Iron Age farmstead of Little Woodbury type. Now, if you remember, we come across a similar building like this in West Wales, and this site, this reconstruction that we're actually looking at now, really helps us understand somewhat of this wonderful Iron Age world that's really starting to develop for us. And if we look at this, and obviously we'll think, and we'll come across some of these sites that we're actually mentioning now in the future. But again, this is an overview. So what can you see on that illustration? You can see, right, so we're now starting to get evidence, for example, that they're starting to work wood in various different ways. They've got much taller roofs, and maybe the doorway's not reconstructed the way it should be. But what we've got a totally circular quernstone there. So this is going to be a really innovative, having these two sandstones to actually grind your grain. Over on the right there, you've got an iron axe, okay, which is great. You've got an iron axe, a proper iron axe that you would really associate with a modern woodsman, for example. As we start to get into the building, we've got all the things that you might see typical, and some of the evidences that we might actually feel very typical at Must Farm, except this isn't on the ground. This isn't raised off the ground. It's actually on the ground. And you can see that they're hanging things from the roof. And what is interesting there is that space there. You've got a first floor. You know, whatever evidence we've got for this actually comes from something else. This is not so long after we start to move into the Iron Age. A few hundred years later, you've got the dunes, and then you've got the bruchs of Scotland, which have multi-layered rooms and cells within them. So we might be able to associate these, for examples, in Bayer type buildings which are made of wood in the Iron Age. And basically a byre, when you think about a byre is a raised area above the ground level. So underneath you've got the ground level where you've got everything, and the byre above. You might actually have second floor space. You might be able to sleep up there. You might be able to keep various foods dry and all the rest of it. So it's interesting that that's being placed into the reconstruction. Obviously, we don't have any evidence in wood for that, but maybe that's possible. And then one of the things that we actually start to think of more than anything in the Iron Age is gardens. Where there's a book that I've got on prehistory that I may have done a little bit, and we're thinking about gardens. And again, this sort of enclosed space, this space within the space, and keeping what's yours, and that's very important. It's when you've one thing that you can think of when you've got a bank and ditch around something, that's your space, right? It might not be defensive at all. It's just my space. It's where I live. It's what I know. It's what I associate. And you start to make boundaries. Those boundaries were having to be created in the Bronze Age. And the reason why you've got boundaries being created in the Bronze Age is you need windbreaks, you need to keep the animals in, and so on and so on. So the idea of control and access analysis and being able to create the space which is yours is very, very important. How you access it, wherever you access it, into an area. And I went to a neighbor of mine, and the neighbor of mine said I've got to do some archaeological work for him. And I looked around his property, and it was quite interesting. And he's got all these fenced off areas. He's got areas for his pigs there. He's got areas for this and that and so on. And I was looking at that and thinking, he doesn't really need to fence all this off, but he has to, because we don't want any sheep wandering along and eating away at his fruit trees. We've got to make sure the pigs don't wander over there. We've got to make sure that what's his is his. And you can clearly see that. And the landscape that I was actually looking at analysing, you can get an idea from the boundaries and so on with the trees growing off them, an idea of the sense and connectedness with the landscape and the age. Anyway, enough of this illustration. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard, and we'll go on to this in the future, of banjo enclosures. Yes. If any of you, I don't know if any of you have watched a recent episode of Time Team, they were talking about banjo enclosures. Now, banjo enclosures, we find them in Hampshire, Wiltshire, Oxfordshire, right? And we find them in other places of Britain. Now, interesting enough, a banjo enclosure is shaped just like that, a banjo enclosure, right? And it might be for a number of different reasons. It might be, there you go, banjo there. You can clearly see it there, banjo. It might be, and again, we'll talk about this again. It might be that those two linear lines there are funneling into this banjo enclosure. So basically, you've got a little palisade, a little bit of ditch, the circular ditch, and that might actually be to keep animals in one place. It might actually be for farming for whatever reasons, right? But we don't get much in the way of settlements associated with the banjo enclosures. So it's a really, really interesting that we'll be looking at these things. And again, in that episode of Time Team, really recently, they were talking about these banjo enclosures, but our banjo enclosures, like these things, because that looks like a banjo as well, except they're not, because whereas you don't get much in the way of buildings in these things, they're obviously used for other purposes. When in fact we look at these examples, and you know what? We actually did a class on these This is the Danacoid and Woodside sites in Llanchwarden, in Dyfed, in West Wales. Obviously from the Bronze Age coming into the Iron Age. And again, this sense of going from the Bronze Age into the Iron Age is something that is really starting to happen. So as we start to get into the lowland areas, what they are doing is within the lowland areas, they're finding hillocks. So basically you've got flat areas. So if we get the scenario, they've moved away from the upland areas. Okay, so you think about Ambleside, we'll move away from all that landscape, we'll go into the lower areas, right? Well, the uplands of Haverick, right? We'll move away from there, we'll go towards Millom, right? This is what they're doing. But within those low-lying areas, best examples are when we look at Maiden Castle, which is near Dorchester. Dorchester, yeah. And when we look at Dorchester, just over there from site of Dorchester, there's Maiden Castle. Now that's within a flat landscape, and this hill fort raises, above the landscape. And what you've got these two hillocks that create Maiden Castle, and they're joined together with all the earth, and over 100 years it's joined together to be a dominating thing within the landscape. It's almost as if in many ways what people are doing, they're moving away from the upland areas and going into the lowland areas and thinking, right, there's a hillock over there, let's just defend it. It's just like a little bit from home, it's like we'll have these upland areas within flat lying areas, in other words. So they're very much away from the abandoned Dartmoor. So we're going into the lowland areas, and we're creating little islands in a way. And it could be said, as Carly from the States has said, that they've got these sites away from the areas that might get flooded within these flat plains. And that's a really, really interesting point, because can you remember about, oh God damn me, I can't remember when it was. It must have been 10 years ago or more, where on the news, like the Somerset levels in Wiltshire, there was these big floods, weren't there? And the landscape was being flooded, and there would be farms with like dikes around them with all the water flowing across the landscape. Don't know if you can remember that. And it makes you think that maybe that happened more often than we think, right? Because even though we're moving from the Bronze Age, so we're moving away from the upland areas and moving into lowland areas, and then they start to find little hillocks like this, and they sort of do something with them to command the landscape. But maybe there's this endless fear of flooding. And when you think about Somerset and the levels there, and again back to what we got at Must Farm, and when we're looking at Must Farm, one thing that I didn't really say much of when we're doing Must Farm, even though Must Farm, when the site was abandoned after the fire, it must have become flooded on a regular basis, and that means that when it was flooded on a regular basis, it would bring in silt to cover the site. So one thing that we didn't mention last week, that maybe there was this fear, there was always this fear that you've got to have a raised settlement because there's a fear of flooding. And we can't deny that fear when we think about modern day societies, such as the societies that are based in Bangladesh, for example. We see the news, and these sorry people, they've got their buildings lying on the plains, and then you've got other people with the stilted structures, and we're thinking, I would prefer to be the people on the stilted structures because the landscape's constantly getting flooded, right? And maybe our ancestors knew this. This is why we're going up into these upland areas. But again, we're just giving a little bit of an overview, and as you can probably feel already, there's a stark difference between the prehistoric stuff we've done before, and we haven't mentioned much in the way of iron either. We're not going to mention much really in the way of iron, truly. We'll do more of that next week. We're going to jump the gun a little bit, and we're going to jump the gun, and we're going to basically look a little bit about one of the big things that stands out in the Iron Age. And then we're going to go back to reconstruction of Glastonbury Lake, talk a little bit about the pottery. So that big thing that sticks out in the Iron Age, which we've already intimated, hang on, are these things. These things. In other words, these banked and ditched enclosures, these hill forts, that are very much synonymous with the Iron Age. Lots of these banks and ditch enclosures really big in their life in the Bronze Age, with those hillocks. We believe that Maiden Castle was a Bronze Age site, and before that was a Neolithic site, and then whatever, and it's all joined together, you know, all systematically joined together. And then in a way, people are pushed towards a new reality, you know, a new. And again, we're looking at this, and we've got these plans, and we're thinking about, if we blink our eye, we think about maybe, you know, 400 years BC, you know, 2,400 years ago. We might think about entrances like this one as we start to go on this, you know, spread of the hill forts. And then we start to see that as hill forts develop, the entranceways get more and more ornate. Let's just stop a moment. Let's just stop a moment. I was thinking at the back of my mind, this wasn't something I was going to mention, but I'm going to mention it now. Sometimes in archaeology, we change our words. For example, when Andy went to school, when I went to school, these were called hill forts. Lots of archaeologists call them bank and ditched enclosures. The reason why we call them bank and ditched enclosures is because we're not really sure whether they were defensive. When you say hill fort, you think defensive, right? Hill, fort, hill, fort. It sounds military, right? So by moving the term to bank and ditched, it aids us to think of these things more than just defended sites. And that's a very important thing to see and look at. Now, again, as we start to see the development of these entrances into these hill forts, what we do start to see is, you know, you've got somebody chucking heads on there, and we don't really know if they built their entrances purely like this or not. But if we could think about the description of two, we could think ditches and the bank could be traced, and maybe some revetment of stone around the outside. Maybe we could trace something like that we've got a basic outline of a ditch, and we've got post holes, and directly beyond those post holes we've got build up of turf and chalk, and we're seeing that. And then what we've got here, we've got even more artist impression seen on 3, but you start to think, well, if you've got all these post holes in the ground, and the size of the post holes, and maybe evidence of some wattle and burning, maybe some of the entrances did look like this. And as they start to move on, more sophisticated with number 4, and then you go on to the really big places, which almost looks as if you've got a medieval site. This could very much look like something associated with an entrance into a modern Bailey castle, you know, 1,500 years later. But again, in many ways, we're getting this evidence from the size of the post holes in the ground. So if we got the post holes in the ground, ones towards the ditch, the outer scarp, you would say, the ditch, and then you've got big post holes. They obviously supported something that was, and then you've got to build up material behind, right? And thinking, right, okay, this is proper banking palisade. You've got smaller post holes before. These are the supports, and maybe that supported some kind of palisade on the top. So lots of assumption from this, but it sort of helps us to understand that the Iron Age is getting a little bit more ornater and a little more developed than it had been in the Bronze Age in regards to sort of the way things are going. You know, it's when we look at this, and our friend in the United States has actually mentioned something which is really relevant, and she's mentioned something really sensible, which Andy, I've not come across this before. And what about these as windbreaks? She says, Carly says, this might act as a windbreak. And even a ditch would act as a windbreak. Um, fenced walls behind this acting as a windbreak. I think that's really interesting, and maybe we don't even mention that. I've never come across that before, and that is a really good take on that. I like that. So right next, when we think about those entrances that we've just seen, and we'll look at that again. One thing that is very, very powerful when we look at hill fort sites is how we understand in regards to the form and arrangements of the bank and ditch sites that we're actually seeing now. For example, the one there, number one, you can see the contour lines, and that might be a little hillock rising within the landscape. So that's known as a contour fort. And you might think of number two, for example, it might be sort of on a plateau. There's a rise in the landscape, Wiltshire, Cumbria, or whatever. There's plateau site. There's plateau-ish number two. And then you've also got some of these on slopes, a bit like causewayed enclosure sites, the one on 3, which may have actually been originally a causewayed enclosure site in the Neolithic period. And 1,500 years later, they make number 3, because there was something already there, into a hill forty looking site. And one thing that we actually do see a lot of in the Iron Age, going all the way from the Iron Age all the way into the medieval period, is number 4. And number 4 you could refer to as a cliff castle. So what you're doing, you're seeing a little bit of a spit going out into the sea, and you're putting banks and ditches around it. And those banks and ditches around it are almost in a way defending a spit that goes out into the sea. So the only way you're going to be able to get to that the only way you're going to actually be able to get to that is by going over those banks and ditches, right, and going past the entranceway. So yeah, so that's a really well defended site, very similar in regards to the types of castellated sites that we actually start to see dominating the medieval period, for example. And what we're going to do after this, we're going to have a little bit of a break, but we've also got these sites, and again, we're coming back to these again. We've also got these sites in the Iron Age which are not completed, right? Now look at this one here. This one is at Ladle Hill in Hampshire, right? And this is a site that's unfinished. The external ditch is clearly visible, with the dumps of soil ready for building the ramparts lying in the interior, but it was never ever completed. Then you're thinking, right, okay. It did start off as a causewayed enclosure. So what they're doing, they're moving all the mud. But I'm looking at this, and you've got Iron Age evidence to say that this is happening. And for me, as somebody working on the land as well as an archaeologist, going through the effort of digging out the ditches, dumping the soil, and then making them into a rampart doesn't make sense. So there might actually be something else going on here, and it's not really, really clear. And unless we excavated a site like that, it would be very difficult to work out anything more. And then what we do find is a reason for having these sites. We'll no doubt come to this again, right? And one of the reasons of having these sites, these pillars rising up around the landscape, right, against a farming landscape. So you've got a farming landscape in the lowland areas, a big farming landscape, all the farmsteads, all the field divisions and all the rest of it, all the water sanitation and all the rest of it. So what you then have is that you've got these being used to store things. For example, This is a site known as Conderton Camp. This is in Herefordshire. And you can clearly see that there's lots of storage pits at this bank and ditched enclosure, hill fort. And if there's loads of storage pits at Conderton Camp, which is, as I said from the description, in other words, they're using this site for storage, stone-lined storage pits, and then they're digging into them later. So what are they storing in these pits? They're obviously storing grain. They're storing things, and somehow they're storing grain so well that it's not getting damp. Because what they would do, they would line these with clay. They would fire them, right? And then they would put a lid on it, probably some kind of shelter above it. And this is going to be well drained as well because it's in chalk, a chalky, very sedimentary landscape. So if any moisture gets in, it goes into the soil. But then again, they're lined. Anyway, so what we're going to do, we're going to have a break now, and then after that, we'll look at this big ditch. But again, we'll be looking a lot more into the Iron Age and how the Iron Age pans out. So what I've got to do now is we're going to have a break. And before we have a break, we're going to see if there is any questions. Right, Peter, any questions from you?
No questions from me.
Okay. What about you from you, David?
No, thank you.
Right, Andy.
Thanks.
Ooh, Anne. Anne.
The entrances that you showed, the wooden.
Yes.
Yeah.
Some of them are stone.
You're saying you just got the post holes. So
yeah.
is the other sort of deduced or what can I say? A sort of imaginary of how they would have developed because they look.
Let's just carry on, and I'll then do a.
No, that's probably about it, really. I didn't quite understand how they got there.
Okay, how the archaeologists worked this out. So okay then. So what you've got, for example, you might have a big post hole there in an alignment. So you've got all these big shaped weird post holes, and they can be very much like that. And then what you have is small post holes behind, right? So what you can work out is that these big post holes in front, these were big timbers. So they're supporting a barrier for material behind. In other words, they're supporting boarding of some description to support the material behind. And as they're supporting the material behind, obviously the height of the palisade at the back is going to be lesser in height than at the front because there's not as much pressure on the timbers behind as there's pressure on the timbers in the front. So the cross section of this is going to be that it's going to be taller like that, and it's going to slowly slope down. So this is what we can deduce. And usually not usually, sometimes if it hasn't been plowed and destroyed, what we might find is evidence of turfs which have been stacked up. So obviously the turf is going to run out, and then they're going to put rubble and all sorts of other stuff in there. This is what we can deduce. In other sites, what you can see is that there's almost as if there's evidence of post holes, but there's slight banks. And from that, you can deduce what you're seeing on the right-hand side. So
intriguing. Yeah.
It is intriguing, yes. Right, okay, so where are we? Hang on. There we go. Stop share. Right. Okay then. Margaret, you, and then we'll have a break.
Well, it showed the artist's impression of what they thought the forts looked like. And they depicted one with a turreted top. Is it like
I think, and what Anne's saying is that's got to be deduced. But what we do say is if you've got a turreted top, then obviously if you can imagine that you've got flat post holes here in the front, right? Smaller post holes behind, two parallel lines, and you've got a gap in the middle. So then what you then have is bigger posts to create the entrance. So those bigger posts indicating an entrance. So they're supporting something of weight above because they're bigger posts. And that's what we can clearly deduce from the archaeology. So you're going to have bigger posts to create the entrance rather than the average side posts that are along the front to create the palisade.
But they were not necessarily turreted, which would have been for weapons.
No, they're not necessarily turreted, no.
I've got to go at about 9:15.
Right, okay. So what we'll do, we'll have a we'll be back. We'll be back about 2 or 3 minutes past 9. So everybody have a break.
Okay.
Okay.
So we'll have a break. I'm going to put the kettle on as well. Jacob, Jacob, Jacob. Jacob, Jacob, Jacob.
Oh, it's so cold, isn't it? Really cold.
I was feeling cold earlier. I feel a bit better now. I don't know.
Well, I got absolutely drenched this morning when I was out with the dog.
Mm.
And I thought I'll go into Kendal. I need one or two things. And my car started bleeping, making a funny noise. And it was
Oh, dear.
flashing, stop driving now.
Oh,
Engine fault. And I was in the middle of the busy street as you go into Kendal.
oh dear.
So I thought I'll just have to get it to the nearest garage. So I took it to the one near the station in Kendal.
Mhm.
And I've left it there so they can have a look. Fortunately, I've got a friend in Kendal and he gave me a lift home. So I can see it'll be a lot of money because it always is.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Mm,
These things are never.
they're never cheap, are they?
They're always a lot more than you expect them. Even if you expect them to be high, they seem to be a lot more than that, don't they?
Well, they probably charge about £100 before they've even done anything.
Yeah.
You know, just to have a look.
Yeah, that was rotten luck. I had to go into Kendal, but I was, I had to go and organise a bank. I've moved the money this afternoon
Ooh.
into the solicitor. So it's a slight move forward, but they still haven't got all the stuff they need. They're really held up still.
Oh,
I've still got no date.
oh no, it's taken ages.
Honestly, it has. But I don't think it's the solicitor's fault. nor the estate agent. It's the management of the
Ashley Court.
yeah, Ashley Court. I think that's been the major hold up.
I think one of my neighbours might be moving there. I'm not sure. Joyce. I know she sold her house, but I don't know where she's going. She's not telling anybody.
Joyce Hayhurst, you mean?
Yes.
Oh, right.
She's not telling anybody where she's going.
Oh, well, I'll go and have a word with her because I plan to go out to walk with her one of the days soon. So I'll see what she's doing.
No, she's keeping quiet. She's not telling anybody where she's going. And then I've got new people moving next door to me at the end of June, and that's taken a long, long time. So
maybe that's Joyce. Maybe she's moving across the road.
No, she's not. No, I did wonder if she was moving into a bungalow, but no.
She kept that quiet. I was talking to her yesterday or the day before.
Yeah.
If Joyce will have an even more difficult job than me because her place is bigger than mine.
Well, she's
the place I'm going into is about half the size of what I'm a bit less than half the size of what I've got now, and I'm having real difficulties in deciding what to keep and what to throw, and it's very difficult downsizing. It's easy to move up. So Joyce's house is bigger than where I live.
Well, she sold it straight away.
All right.
It's the headmaster from Dalham's school is going to be in. I think he's got a family, so it's a good family house.
Yeah.
So she's got a lot of downsizing to do then. Well,
as I say, even more than me.
I don't know where she's moving. Maybe she's not moving, but she's staying in Arnside. That's all I know.
Well, maybe she's not. Maybe she's not going anywhere near Ashley Court then.
I don't know. No.
Although she'd have a lot of people she knows there because she does a lot of walking.
Yeah.
That headmaster's moved a long way then.
Well, his parents. Collins Lane, doesn't he?
Well, yeah, but he lived on our road before that.
Did he?
Yeah, his parents lived down here.
Yeah, I believe so.
He's a nice lad.
Is he a lad?
Yeah. He's had a meteoric career. Well, he must be only in his early 30s, if that.
Well, I decided to move.
I wish you would.
Thank you. And I got somebody come round to value it, and I said, yes, I'll put it on the market. And he said, we've got to do special security things. You'll have to come in and do a facial recognition thing.
Oh, God.
Said, what?
What?
This is what we have to do these days. Anyway,
Yes.
I was going to go in the next day, and I had an accident and fell flat on my face.
Oh,
and I looked nothing. I looked like Daffy Duck for a week. So I couldn't go in. And so I've changed my mind. It gave me time to think, and I thought, no, I'm not really ready to move yet. I'll stay where I am for now.
It is so much hassle. Do you know when we bought the place in West Wales? It took them. Wait for it. We paid for it. It was ours, and then the estate agent said, hang on a minute, right, it's going to take 2 years for it to go through the land registry. 2 years. So in other words, if we wanted to sell it a year before, we couldn't because it took 2 years to register it.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? The time all this sort of stuff takes and all the rigmarole.
Oh, it's the pandemic, love. It's the pandemic.
Oh, is that what it was?
But isn't it?
They've always got some excuse, haven't they?
Isn't it strange?
Exactly.
They'd come in for a facial recognition thing, and then I fell on my face. And
the fact that you've decided not to go, it was auspicious, wasn't it?
Well, it was just strange. It just gave me time to think, and I thought, I'm not going on this year. I don't think I've got time to move.
Can I just say one thing? You're the one who's got to go at 15:15, right? And somebody said to me online, they've said, this is Carly from the States. She says, you are so cute, lovely. Now, is she referring to David, me, And definitely not Andy, definitely not Pete, and or Margaret. So there you go.
Well, you're the only one that can read it, so it must be you, Carl.
No,
Yeah.
it can't be. She says you are. She said, hang on. No, she said you all are so cute, lovely. All of us are cute, including David and Andy.
Bless her.
Thank you, Carly.
Thank you.
Made my day.
Well, but the thing is, we're all cute. I thought it was a competition thing there. She's also, she said, living along the Columbia River or the prairie areas, it is my opinion that England Island is now a tamed garden. You know, my response to that, what does that say about Scotland and Wales? They're not tamed. They're overworldy landscapes with weirdos like me and Pete living in it. Right. By the way, Peter had to move from Cornwall, right? Because he's not, because he's weird. Got it? Cool. Right. Okay. Somebody said online earlier on, what are you doing today? We're doing the Iron Age. And I said, oh, that's okay then. Right. So, you know, I think what I might do with the Iron Age is take more of these things apart, you know, just sort of dissecting some of these sites and how they've developed. You know, and the problem is, I can remember doing the Iron Age years ago in Lantwick Major, and this one woman had been with us for like 2 years, and she said, "I've had enough of Iron Age hill forts. I've been doing them for 2 years with you." Anyway, this itself is the extravagant bent of what a hill fort ditch looks like in the Iron Age. This is not Maiden Castle or Hod Hill or Stanwick or anywhere like this. This is Egeradon Hill Fort in Dorset, right? Egeradon. It sounds Welsh, doesn't it? Egeradon in you. Anyway, so you can. So the one thing about this wasn't built on a Wednesday afternoon, right? It took two things. The first thing as well is most of these hill forts, bank ditch enclosure sites, right, were developed over hundreds, if not thousands of years, right? So where you see the eventual banks and ditches, that's a lot of years of change, right? 1 minute it started maybe off as a causewayed enclosure in the Neolithic period. Several thousand years later, it turned up like something like this. We do believe that there was a causewayed enclosure at Maiden Castle, right? So again, we're going to flip onto another image. Let's just get into it. So one thing that we do find is that there's it could be said that there's a clear differentiation between a hill fort and a settlement. So again, this is another quite clear thing in the Iron Age. Let me just bring you up to speed. In the Neolithic period, we've got zones, haven't we? We've got the woodland that we don't go anywhere near. We've got the burial landscape. We've got the landscape of the ancestors. You've got the landscape of the settlements. You've got the landscape of the monuments and you know and all these other things. And you've got the landscape of farming. So you've got all these different areas in the Neolithic period. In the Bronze Age, they get a little bit more complicated. You chuck in mining with that. Things have changed, climate change, and all the rest of it. And then when you get to the Iron Age, things get more clearer. Upland areas are abandoned. Bugger that. We're not going to go there anymore. It's completely abandoned. All the ancestors, everything is gone. We're not doing that anymore. The chambers, standing stones, stone circles, forget about it. We're not going to go up to the upland areas of Cumbria anymore, right? But in the Iron Age, what you've got also is you've got lowland areas. You've got in what you stand to see is there's basically 5,000 hill forts spread all the way across Britain. So you've got these hill forts absolutely everywhere across Britain, 5,000 or more. They're in every area, right? They're in Cumbria, they're Caithness, they're in Ireland, Wales. We're not seeing as many hill forts on the islands, but maybe that's another reason because you're surrounded by water. That speaks for itself. And then what you've got, these are in the middle. These are islands, human islands with banks and ditches around them, hill forts around them, and you've got settlements like this settlement. And one of the biggest problems that we get with these settlements is twofold. when you got settlements over buildings above buildings, right, it's very difficult to understand what's going on. And the one there clearly hasn't got any banks and ditches around it. It's just got buildings, right, with all these little post holes for various sort of four posters, structures, storage, you know, holes in the ground and so on. The point is with this is that you don't really need it's called unenclosed structures, right, in that period at the bottom. But as the landscape is getting bigger with more settlements, they've decided to put a bank and a ditch around some of the buildings. What does that tell us? Don't know. But again, you got the complexities of as the Iron Age evolves and it gets more and more diverse. And when you get things more and more diverse, they get more and more confusing to interpret. So just think of that. All those post holes, what the bloody hell's going on, right? And the bigger the post hole, the bigger the structure, or the bigger the post that was in it, right? Yes. I'm glad you collared me earlier on, Margaret. Doesn't necessarily mean to say that you got big post holes that it is supporting some kind of structure above. There might have just been a huge post in there, and there might have been a totem, right? But again, what we got to think about is how we start to evolve as the period goes, and lots of things lots of things get, as I say, get more complex. So moving on to the next image, which is this. Oh, this is really good. We like this. And then we'll go up to, we are going to Scotland in a short while, and Chowcaster in Cornwall, which obviously Peter has been to, and Chowcaster have been there as well as Carn-Yenny. But this is actually what a reconstruction of the Glastonbury Lake villages. Now, the difference between what we've seen at Muss Farm and the Lake Village at Glastonbury is these were on natural islands that were in flooded meres within the Glastonbury Somerset landscape. Now, I'm looking forward to doing this one. I really, really am. And the reason why I'm looking forward to this one is based on the work of Arthur Bullied and Harold St. George Gray over 100 years ago. Actually 115 years ago, within the Somerset landscape. When you go to Glastonbury, as you go down the main high street of Glastonbury, you've got something called the Guildhall. The next door to the Guildhall, you've got a museum. And when you go into the museum, you've got little reconstructions of little miniature models, reconstructions of the Glastonbury Lake Village and the Mere Lake Village. And they're within walking distance of Glastonbury. And if you go into the field now, along you go with a map, and it basically says over there there's a little hillock, and that hillock is what's left of the Glastonbury Lake Village. And when they excavated it, they found 80 odd buildings associated with the Glastonbury Village, 80 odd buildings on an artificial island. Absolutely brilliant archaeology. Now, so when we think about this and when we understand it, it's again, it works very, very differently as opposed to the likes of Muss Farm and Flag Fen, right? They are proper islands. They're not man-made islands. They're proper islands. And then by the time we get to the end, we look at man-made islands again. So the thing what we can say about the this period of the Iron Age is very, very complex. Now, somebody online, they've also commented, they basically said, this is Reese saying, it's difficult to say whether a hill fort should be classified as a settlement. Yeah, I'm saying they weren't settlements because hill forts are clearly in the main used to store things. Store things. Again, Reese is right, one or two may have been settlements, and one or two of these hill forts, larger ones, particularly in the flat-lying areas, or if they're not hill forts or similar to hill forts, like Khalifa Atrabatum, to actually do eventually turn into settlements. And again, a point with lots of these sites, like a site like this, were they seasonal? Because you can imagine at Glastonbury, in the winter months, there's going to be extensive flooding. No matter what you're going to try and do, the water level is going to flood. It's going to flood into your settlement. Are these things seasonal? And again, when we think about the low-lying areas around the said bank and ditch enclosures or these types of sites, right, you could think that flooding in the winter months was a real problem. So again, thinking about these things as things start to develop, again, water is a different problem in the Iron Age. Again, there's lots of it in the winter months. There's a lot more water, as we described, from there's a lot more rain from the end of the Bronze Age. So we've already established that. So again, interesting times ahead when we look at the Iron Age. And again, Carly's right in what she said online as well. Are these types of settlements, like when we look at Star Car from the Neolithic period, could they be associated with trade centers? Is there because they're on islands? Maybe people are going out there on boats. They're trading things. Quite a safe thing. What's going on? Don't really know, but that's an idea. And then when we think about trade, we start to really understand that in the Iron Age, pottery comes of age. Pottery finally comes of age. Look at this. This is Iron Age pottery. Now, this is Iron Age pottery associated with Glastonbury and Mere villages. And what you can say, even though these are contemporary with the period, and they're all undoubtedly made by hand, they are really fine tradable objects. And when you think about the diversity of the pottery that is now coming out of the Iron Age, there's more going on. And then we eventually start to see coinage. And again, you can actually see the decoration is let's take that word that Peter likes using, Celtic. These are not Celtic designs. These are very, very different. The style is a very Britain style, a very sort of localized style, maybe to that area, but obviously we've got decoration on lots of pottery in the Iron Age. Again, this is an introduction today. We will be looking at more Morris pottery in the near future. And the one in the middle there, the tallest one, so as I start to get my hands out, it's not as tall as it looks, right? This is just under the size of an old school ruler. So this is just over 24 centimeters in height, just under a foot, basically, right? The one in the middle, but it's really, really fine decorated. And guess what? It's got flat bottoms. So what do flat bottoms tell you? Some of the houses had flat floors, right? And that, again, another important thing. If you're gonna sit some of these, if you're gonna stand some of these, you need to have flat floors. End of story. That's it. End of story. Morning glory. That's what you need. So was that Margaret who just left us, Andy? Can you see? Think so.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Goodbye, Margaret. If you leave me now, you take away. Sorry, Andy gets me singing. See, you did it again, Andy. So we're thinking. One thing we're thinking is there's lots of wooden stuff going on, but now we're going to the age of the stone tops, away from the wooden tops to the stone tops, and what we've got is, so we've got soft buildings, timber buildings, sort of turf roofs, thatch roofs, pottery, harder again, and stone buildings. This is at Chowcaster in Cornwall, or Chowcaster, whatever, Cornwall. Now, what you can see is that young lady is sat there. I don't know what the hell she's doing. Has she got a bottle of beer in? She's got a bottle of wine there. Flipping heck. Typical Cornish alcohol. And what we can clearly see there is we've got these square circular rooms. We got rooms. We've got buildings which are all stone, right? We can assume that they got beams on the roof again, and obviously you got a wattle. You got purlins between the beams, and like my roof, and then you got the likes of wattling above that, and then what you do find is you've clearly got either thatch or turf roofs. And obviously, if you've got a turf roof, you're going to put a nice layer of skins underneath that as well. Oh, we get more complicated again. So in other words, again, as things start to develop, what we've got as things. So what we've now got, we've got buildings like this which don't have banks and ditches around them, right? The natural sort of thing around that is like that you've got water around it, and that you've got times where you've got it unenclosed banks and ditches around it. But then what we then find is we then go to Pembrokeshire, West Wales, and if we look at this, this is how, again, how very complex, very, very complex Iron Age archaeology gets. So if we go like that, voila, 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 voila. Find the entranceway. Well, there it is. You can there right there. There is the entranceway. And this is what I was right. This is what I was trying to explain. Right. So you've got the earthen bank around the outside. There's no signs of post holes for the earthen bank. It's just an earthen bank. They may have put a palisade around the top of it, and that's it, with no walkway or whatever, just a palisade. Got no evidence of that because the palisade would have been higher than the bank, and all that evidence eroded away. And some of the evidence from the bank has gone in ditches, gone. So what we've got there, we've got the entranceway. Those 6 things there. That means that those post holes were supporting big timbers. Now, don't come back at me and say, oh, you could have had a big post hole and you could have had a small timber in it. It don't work like that, folks. If you've got a big post hole and a small timber, the timber's just going to fall over. It's just going to subside, right? So you've got big timbers, you've got big post holes to support big timbers. End of. These things here are 4 posters or 5 posters or whatever, 4 posters to support your grain storage buildings, or your buildings that actually have got chickens in, because you've got chickens in the Iron Age. You might actually have lambs in them, or piglets, and so on. And then you get to the rest of the buildings. These things are actually the drip lines right around the buildings, and you can see the post holes are supported, associated with the buildings. So obviously there you've got buildings within buildings within buildings within buildings, right? The Harry Nielsen song, circles within circles. Again, look at these storage buildings again. So storage is very, very important. And what they've done is what they've done, it's very likely that instead of having the bank and ditched enclosure on a little hillock within the flatline landscape with all the farmsteads around, right, which are mainly open, because they don't really need defenses, but obviously the fields and stuff, hold the animals in and keep the grain safe from marauding animals like my damnable sheep. What you then have is that some people who didn't have access to these big sort of places to keep things safe, like the hill forts, bank and ditch enclosures, what you then got is these sites that have a bit of absolutely everything, right? And again, one thing, and it's so good to have people online as well. Reminder, as I'm flowing so fast in my head, Reese is saying again, strange that we see these stone buildings in Cornwall and also up north in Scotland, but seems to be no stone between. I think I'm correct in saying that. You're dead correct in saying that. And why, Reese? Well, Cornwall, you've got lots of stone. Big chunks of Scotland, you got lots of stone. You've got Anglesey in North Wales, you've got lots of stone. So Peter's been to the one in on Anglesey with me, and lots of them in Cornwall, Chowchester, and whatever. But in places like Wiltshire, you have structures that are not made of stone because Wiltshire is based within a landscape of the chalky downs, and even though chalk is used, the very soft chalk is used for some constructions in the Iron Age, right? It's not really used very often, and you can't really build a very big building out of rubbly flint and bits of chalk. So your buildings around Wiltshire, Hampshire, Lincolnshire are all are more than likely going to be completely constructed out of wood and wattle and daub. But these buildings are clearly made of stone. Now, where's this? This is actually in Perth. Now this looks very different than what we're seeing elsewhere. This is an Iron Age site. This is known as a dune, and a dune is a circular structure, right? And these are actually for supporting flooring, right? These are beam slots, right? Not put logs for scaffolding. These are beam slots. These are the dunes of Scotland and Lewis and Dune, Dublin, Dune, Dublin, Dublin. That ties in with Ireland as well. Yeah. So wow. Yeah. Great. Yeah. We're going to do loads of these buildings, dunes, and again, really, really nice things. And what we have is the dunes as excavated. And there we go. That there is a dune rather than a brug. Right. We'll discuss what a brug is in a minute. And so again, we do see these in Scotland and Ireland, and obviously the bruchs in the northern part of Scotland. And what we've got is this is the dune of Castan and Stickir on northeast, and these are very interesting. So what this dune is a stone tower, kind of a shallow type tower. You can see the wall there, shallow type tower, not as tall as a brug, right? But the dunes, well, they're placing sometimes on artificial islands, usually on islands that already exist there, and these themselves are a subject that I'm really looking forward to telling you about. And they got causeways out to these. And I know that they did an excavation of a dune on Tyne, right? And whenever I start to talk about Scottish sites, my accent changes, if you haven't noticed, because it's almost as if I'm back working in Orkney. But there you go. This is a bit confusing. This is a brug, but it's known as the Dune Barleray Brug on Lewis. This is a typical a brug. A brug is in BROCH, brug. And this brug, as opposed to a dune, which was lower lying in height, and the dunes had thicker walls, and these had cavity walls, right? And this is typically a brug. And as I say with brugs, you've got rather different levels within the buildings. And the person who said that I should be just showing you how to pronounce Welsh words, now we're using Scottish words. Somebody said, as in Lorna Dune, as in Dune, does that refer to as Ireland? You could refer to Dune as in D-U-N, rather than Dune as in D-O-O-N, but this is a dune on a dune. So, yes, I thought I'd clear that one up. So, somebody's noticed that my accent's really come on. I love brocks. I really, really do. And I've seen a few of them in Scotland. And one of the brooks that I absolutely do love is actually the Brug of Mercer. Now, the Brug of Mercer is on Shetland, and the floor of the brug was disturbed by later use of the building. Now, interesting enough, the walls here of this one on Lewis, and the height of these are 9 meters. Well, the height of the one still standing, which would have originally been 15 meters in height, the one still standing at Mercer is in excess of 12 to 13 meters high. And basically you go up these stairs all the way to the top, all the way to the top. And interesting enough, I remember being at the top and they what it is at the top. And again, really looking forward to showing you a whole lecture on Mercer and how it works. And obviously, hopefully get hold of some of my original images from actually visiting the site. So no using anyone else's stuff on that one. But the one of the Brocha Musa, it's amazing. All right, it's absolutely amazing. And what escarcement what escarcement level is, what escarcement level is basically to actually support a roof. So basically, there would have been a roof in here. So basically, there's a building within a building. But some other archaeologists, because it's sort of conical, it conicals. Hang on, wait a minute. It conicals sort of that way, right? So basically, what we've got is a roof layer here. That's what's supporting the scarcement layer. So when you find the scarcement layer in a bruch, what you do find, it gives you a sense of, there's a structure within, right? There was definitely a structure within. So again, there's so much interaction going on today with you guys. Somebody online, Risa, said, as in, think about the word camelendunum, and you think about dune as in place, or fortified area, which has come down in the English to the likes of Colchester. But this is all stone building. This is completely stone building. And then Anne's mind's going now, and I can clearly feel Anne's mind is going, because this is a crannog. This is a crannog. This is the Milton Loch Crannog, in good old Scotland. Now, what we've got with crannogs, we found several in Wales, and there's loads in Ireland, and there's loads in Scotland, but very few that we know about in England, right? And but basically the best way to describe a crannog is that it's a low-lying island, whether it's man-made or artificial, in the Iron Age. And crannogs go all the way into the early medieval period, and it's as it is. And before Anne says anything, how do we know it looked like this, Anne? Because we got evidence of the roof, we got evidence of the walls, we got evidence of post holes, we got evidence of all this, so we can clearly know that they looked like this. And one which was excavated at a place called Llangors Crannog, which is near Wales, that has been thoroughly excavated. So we've got a good idea of understanding how these can look as reconstructions. And Carly from the States, she's saying, are we seeing a sense of Egyptian architecture? I don't know. Anne, we move from sort of an earthen type wattle building, all made, but basically usually at these sites they built up these islands using stones, right? So you've got brushwood, you've got stone, brushwood, stone, and building this whole thing up, right? So what we then got is this. Yes, it does look like a wheel. This is known as a wheelhouse, right? And there's a brilliant site at Scarthness, which is on the island of Shetland, which I've actually visited. And we've got these buildings up there, which I can tell you about. And I got some photographs from this. So the Scarthness site. So this wheelhouse is at North Uist, and this itself, those pillars there will support the roof, right? And those pillars are individual sort of hubby holes. You might store animals in them, you might store food in them, people might live in them, you might do iron working in them. They are really complex structures. But as you can see, folks, in one lecture, I've moved on from things that they didn't have in the Iron Age. Start again. Things that they didn't have in the Bronze Age or before, and now you're getting really complex structures. And lots of these, the evidence of these is actually coming from Scotland. In many ways, the Iron Age is more advanced in Scotland, in many more shapes and forms than we guess. So this itself, this image, is this, and these are fascinating buildings. I studied one of these as part of my as part of my my master's degree. And basically, somebody's asking how Crannog is spelled. So this itself, what you've got within these buildings, is that you've got everything that you need, right? So what you've got water tanks. You've got tanks within some of these that you might actually have, for example, fresh water animals kept in. That side building, the one at Scartness, for example, you've got industrial processes directly next door to the rest of the building. These are usually really thick stone walls, and the main light itself might be through some little side holes, and obviously you've got the heavy roof supported by these pillars within. Again, that's a lecture in itself, and obviously these are really developing to a high standard, a high degree of technology. And the one thing that we haven't mentioned much today is military. Now we're going to chuck a couple of swords in there. And it would be completely amiss of me if I didn't mention swords, right? And it'd be completely amiss of me if I didn't mention chariots. So we will mention chariots, and I need to speed on a little bit. I've got 20 minutes to do this. But now what we've got is that we've got Iron Age swords, Iron Age sheaths, and the Iron Age sword itself is the one number B2, and the sheaths are A, B1, and C, and these are for holding swords. Now, the one at B1, B2, was actually found at Ebleton in Cumbria. So you've got an Iron Age sword found in a sheath, actually found in Ebleton in Cumbria. So I thought I'd chuck that up. And the one A, that scabbard A, has a particularly fine example of what's referred to as the mirror style Celtic art that we start to see erupt into the Iron Age. So again, what we've got is stylistically, we've got the one on the right isn't got like a much of a Celtic design and more of a Gothic design. B is more of a localized design, and A is taking the idea of Celticism as an architectural form into some of the artistic forms across Britain. So somebody's asked me a question online. Reese, can you re-put that so I can answer it, because I don't really understand what you're talking about. Right. So what we've got is that we've now got this. I mentioned this last week. I want to show you color images of this. This is actually the Battersea Shield, found by Battersea Bridge in the 1800s. And again, this shows you how far art, how far technology has come, how far their metalworking has come in. They haven't stopped making materials in copper and tin and bronze and gold. They've continued, but and what we've got is the art style has very much served its own way to influence the metal workers to work in as many metal forms as possible. This is what we can clearly see with the Battersea Shield. It may actually be in bronze, but it's actually an Iron Age artifact. Next, and again, what we've got from some more of the complicated types of pottery, we've got again an arrangement of pottery. Some plain. These are all handmade. Some more advanced. And then when you start to see at sometime around 50 years BC, towards the end of the Iron Age, just under 100 years before the Roman era, what we do clearly see is that the wheel is introduced and we start to see lots more pottery made on the wheel, but this is all still made by hand, and obviously a lecture looking at this. And then what we've got, we haven't mentioned something that maybe dominates prehistory a lot, and what that is burial. What we're actually starting to see is these are actually found in North Humberside. These are referred to as square ditched burials, right? And the burial is in the middle. These are known as arras burials. So what you've got you've got clearly that you've got a hole dug in the middle, right? And you've got a burial. And then what you have then is you've got a ditch, a square ditch cut around the outside, and that earth is turned in the middle, maybe to create some kind of mound, and all these are being ploughed out, so we don't really know the shape and the form of what's going on there. You can clearly see on the right-hand side that there's been some deep ploughing on this, and some ploughing that's caused some ruts through this site on the right-hand side. So these sort of ploughing marks. This might actually be from earlier evidence rather than later evidence, but they're clearly these burials. So that sense of burials again. And what we are starting to see, as we've got many of these, there's one being found in West Wales in more recent years. And what we clearly see is that there's a place called Wetwang Slack. There's a place called Garton Slack in Yorkshire. This is an example from Garton Slack, excavated in 1971. We've got quite a few chariot burials in Britain. This is towards the later periods, more towards about the 100 years BC mark. And we're told that the designs of these chariots, when the Romans come across them, are basically 300 years out of date. Right, just think about that. These are chariot wheels. So what they've done, they've buried somebody associated with a chariot that's been taken apart, right? And what you can see is the spokes there. You can just see the wooden spokes just coming out there, and you've got an iron wheel, right? And you've got the boss in the middle. And other evidence of the wagon and the cart is there somewhere, but a burial there. And again, these are the types of the more complex burials that you actually see in the Iron Age. So again, that might be seemingly a reconstruction, and that we know that they were actually wearing chainmail, because the guy found excavated at Garton Station from Humberside, right? He was actually found buried with chainmail. So we know that these people had chainmail. So chainmail's a lot earlier than the Roman period and a lot earlier than the medieval period, for example. So again, a lot more diversity, a lot more evidence from the archaeology, a lot more understanding. And what we then find, we actually start to find the type of thing that some of you women may have been given when you were children. Can you ever remember being given a mirror like this? I certainly remember a couple in my parents' house, right? This is actually known as the birdlip bronze mirror. And this was found in Gloucestershire in 1879. Basically, it's a bit of bronze that's been so polished that's that you can actually use it as a mirror. So obviously you've turned it around, finely decorated there, advancedly decorated. Again, you've got the sort of the sort of circle of life motifs and the never-ending form of, as Peter would say, Celtic art on there. Obviously this art style at birdlip, and we do actually see this. The uniformity, the symmetry, it's the symmetry of the design. Again, another lecture can look at that. We've found a couple more of these as well. And now, I did say that as we start to come to the end of the Iron Age, and I'm so excited to bring you lots of these things with the Iron Age, what we've got is wheel-turned pottery. So we've got evidence. This is known as Aylesford pottery, wheel-turned pottery. And as you can see, they are now starting to come of age. Now, when people turn around to say that the Romans introduced the wheel, well, Somebody did, but it wasn't the Roman invasion that introduced the wheel. The wheel was already in Britain, right? So that's one point. The Romans didn't introduce the wheel. They didn't introduce chickens being here as well. They didn't introduce the ability for people to have started to build their own towns and cities with or without the Roman invasion of AD 43. And when we start to think about it, this isn't a settlement, but settlements may start to actually look like this. What we actually start to see is we've actually got proper cremation cemeteries. So you can actually clearly see in the middle there, you've got a walkway between them. Cemeteries, not dissimilar to our cemeteries today. Small burials, you've got cremations, you've got inhumations. If you put gravestones in this, it'd look probably very similar to a modern burial ground with a walkway through the middle. And obviously, the walkway's been placed there later on because there's earlier cremations there and so on. But yes, so what we've got going on is complexities associated with their burial. And then what we do have is that the way people are burying on the continent and the styles and objects that they're burying people with on the continent is a style that comes over to us. And we can clearly see that now. It's almost as if suddenly 1 minute, and this is before this is before the actual Roman era. People are actually some of this material is being produced locally. Some of this material is actually coming over to the continent, but it certainly ended up in the burial. It certainly ended up in the burial archaeology, as in this form. And this is to be found near the eventual Roman site at Verulamium, St Albans, which is just north of London, in Hertfordshire. And again, this we won't actually get to anything like this for quite some time, because that's sort of the interchange between the sort of play between sort of a little bit of influence from Europe, but without the Roman invasion, sort of some stylistic stuff. So the Roman world stylistically gets in, but there's no invasion. There's just sort of influences. There's influences. We can obviously see through the years that our lands have been influenced by things going on in the continent, but equally in Britain, we're influencing things on the continent ourselves, because our architectural style at the north, you don't see bruchs in Europe. We're developing these things ourselves. We've got to think that it's a two-way exchange of styles. Some of our styles go that way, some of the styles go this way, some of our styles don't go that way, and so on and so on. Right. And when we think about this, towards the very end of the Iron Age, what we do find is that burials, this is the Welwyn Garden City site in Hertfordshire, in 1965, when they were building Welwyn Garden City, the new city. In the 1960s, they were finding lots of Roman stuff, and they were finding lots of Roman burials. And what you can clearly see now is when people were being buried, they were being buried with Roman goods. Again, before any Roman invasion. And we've forgotten another complete subject as well. Let's just go into this as well. Just a few more things to look at, right? Lindo Moss, an Iron Age man found in a peat bog, Chester way, right? So this is going to be East of Chester. So peat marsh, Lindo Moss. They originally thought this was actually a murder victim. I think the story goes that a guy's wife had disappeared, and they found a body on the moss, and they thought it was the guy's wife. So he panicked, and I think the story is that he admitted to murdering his wife, but they didn't find his wife at all. They actually found a body. Anyway, I think that's the story. I think it is. They didn't find his wife's remains, strangely enough. He should have just not said anything. It really complicated things forensically. They went out looking for more bits of body, and they just kept finding bits of Iron Age remains in there. They didn't find the guy's wife. Anyway, so another thing that we've got very, very much typical. Hang on, have we missed an image? No. Oh yeah. One thing that we might think is very, very, very familiar to us from later periods, and maybe earlier periods, is we're getting sort of representation of shrines, sort of not occupational buildings. There's no hearths and stuff in there. So what are these things? Right? Are they shrines? Are they some kind of temples? What's going on? Is this associated with local deities? Again, we're not really sure what's going on, but these are very different buildings than buildings that people lived in. And the one up in the top left-hand corner looks very Roman, but it's not Roman at all. We find Roman designed temples very much later on, and one being excavated at Maiden Castle as well, but that's a Roman temple. So these temples, these Iron Age temples, are very different than anything before, but they're very similar to the Roman stuff that comes later. Really odd, particularly the one on the left-hand corner. And then mentioned earlier on, Camulodunum. Camulodunum. This site of Camulodunum is basically saying, we're building banks and ditches, we're moving on, there's lots of rivers and drainage. And the thing is, Camulodunum would have probably, if it wasn't, if it wasn't for the Roman era, it's likely that Camulodunum would have developed into a town anyway. So hang on. And we've got one example like that at Calivera Atrobatum. So, again, these things developing with ditches and banks and boundaries and all these different things that we would think were Roman, but more in the sense that they are actually, we would have got there. It's very interesting to say that. We're not. Lots of people who look at the Roman era in Britain, AD 43, they're starting to see that the things that we were doing before are things that are continued into the Roman era. Some town plans like Colchester didn't always evolve on the standard Roman format. Very similar when we look at Calivera Atrobatum, which is basically Silchester, which is west of Reading. So again, more about that later on. And again, what we've got is that we're starting to see the development of low-lying areas, but they've got banks and ditches around them. And they're not looking anything much like hill forts anymore. So what they're doing, they're using the furniture of the banked and ditched enclosures, the hill forts, as you can tell, I'm speeding up now, to actually develop towns and cities, i.e. Calivera Atrobatum, i.e. this one in Hertfordshire at Ravensburg. And again, this whole play on whether they're settlements or for storage or whatever is very much borne out on something like this. This is in Roxburgh. This is Eldon Hill. And again, a play on thinking that maybe are all those things there buildings or what's going on there. So some of these banks and ditch enclosures do get more complex. They're not just for storage. Some actually develop into more than just that. And maybe as well, some of these things there's a little bit of influence on what's going on here from Europe, but nevertheless we're developing these things anyway. And finally, what we do find is that as the Iron Age gets later and later, this type of thing like this, the archaeology of this, this type of thing is a ditch around a very small farmstead settlement. So we're starting to get the idea of farmsteads with ditches around them, right? Whatever for drainage to keep the animals out, to say that this is ours, these buildings are ours, that's why we've got a ditch around it, boundary. This is what's going on. And this itself is very much something that caused John to be forced out these classes, if you can remember, when he said that something like this was found in Australia, and we're not going to use his exact words. Well, this thing itself is a native British artifact. and it might be that this is evidence of a slave chain, which was actually found in Cambridgeshire at a place called Lordsbridge. Who these slaves were, if they are humans, if there is a human slave chain, maybe we'll go on to that again. That's on display in the Cambridge University Museum, which I'm not sure that Margaret may have actually seen or not. And finally, as we close today, we can't end the Iron Age without the following two images. And again, next week, we've got loads of Iron Age stuff. And the people online, if you could stay online, I'll have a chat with you after everybody else has departed. Two last things. I mentioned the Iron Age, you've got coins. Yes. Barley sheaths up in the left-hand corner. Proper design of a horse there. But this is the typical Uffington horse, right? So now we've got gold coins. We've got bronze coins. We've even got poting coins, which is a mix of sort of tins and coppers and lead. And we've got iron coins as well, over big chunks of the territories of Britain. And finally, the territories of Britain that we're talking about. So what we can quickly see from this plan is that the peoples of Britain that were creating coins, the Giurgigis, the Atrebatis, the Regnesis, the Katiakai, the Cataphalani, the Buni, the Kornovi, Coritani, Treravantes, Aichinai, Bragantes were all producing coins, but the likes of the Siluris, Demite, the Kanglai, Ganganai, and all these other ones, Caledonians and so on, weren't, we know, producing coins. Not really sure about the Parisai. Maybe the Debunai were. But the one thing about these names is this. These names were given to these people via Roman cartographers. The Siluris is not a name that the people would have called themselves. It's a name that was given to them by the Romans. But the Cantiaci, the Cantai is actually mentioned on coins. Trinoi is mentioned on coins. So we know Catuf is actually mentioned in coins. So we know that these people represented themselves as these people. The Siluris is a name given to them by the Romans, and the Ordoviciis is also another invented name. On that note, enough of that tonight. We've got really exciting stuff to do next week. Again, people on YouTube, if you could stay there for a little bit longer, and we're going to see if there are any questions. Margaret's put something in a chat box, and she has said, "Were any hill forts built during the Roman occupation?" No, mainly they ceased to be what they were needed to be, and hill forts were occupied, but they weren't. They were reoccupied, but they weren't used for what they were used for before, because the Romans reorganized the landscape. Instead of using hill forts, they used villas to control the landscape and the farmsteads. So, right. Okay, let's start off with David, who's you can see his glasses there, but can't see anything else. David, anything you want to say?
No, thank you. Good night, all.
Good night,
Good night,
David. I'm glad
David.
you joined us. Don't forget the link. I'll see you next week, David. No,
Yeah, thank you.
no. Okay, Andy, anything you want to say?
No, very big area.
Well, yeah, we've covered everything from the well, not everything from the Irish. We've done a big chunk, and now we can start taking chunks of that out. I didn't do that with the Bronze Age because it wouldn't have made as much sense.
No.
But it would have been a bit washy, but it made a lot more sense there.
No, look forward to it.
Yeah, I'm going to look forward to it as well. Loads of Iron Age stuff to do. I'm going to miss a load out, but I can't do it all. But mining next week, folks. Mining.
Thanks.
Mining next week. So mining next week. Right. So anything from you, Peter?
No. Just wondered how they first decided that they could use the iron.
The problem is with iron, it's not something you can come across by accident, because
No.
it needs massively high temperatures. You can come across tin melts at a low temperature, lead melts at a low temperature, the golds and the silvers, but and coppers, but iron is a very high, and you're going to need 1,400 degrees C. How are you going to get that temperature? And it's not just by accident. They may have been firing pottery at the time, which needs high temperatures, but not that high. It may be maybe a kiln just burnt out, and it just the temperatures rose. We don't know. Yeah, they may have used iron oxides in the kiln, and suddenly they start to turn a strange color. I can't see how it's done by accident, but maybe they did. I don't know. Right. Okay. Thanks for that, Peter. So we won't see you tomorrow, but
No.
hopefully see you. We'll see you next week, and I'll
Yeah,
explain.
definitely next week. Yeah.
I'll explain Thursday evening to you, which is very different. Right. Okay then. Anne, anything from you?
Not really. I thought that was really interesting and very wide ranging, and look forward to what's coming from it.
There's going to be a lot coming from it, even
Yes.
things that we haven't done. In fact, we didn't even go down a single mine today, so that wasn't even mentioned. I didn't think we mentioned women or men once. You know, there's or animals. I don't think we did mentioned animals much at all. Maybe, don't know. So, right, anything else, guys? Andy, Anne, or Peter?
No.
No, thanks.
Oh well, that's a quiet one. All right then. Thank you guys for joining me online there, and obviously I'll chat with the YouTube people now. So anyway, no, Anne,
Good night.
Andy, and Peter. I'll see you
Yeah.
all next week. Thanks for your
Thanks,
support.
Good night.
Thank you,
Good
guys.
night.
Bye.
My
Good night,
pleasure.
everybody.
Night.
Good night.
Night, guys. Night. Right, I've just got you guys alone on YouTube. So I've mentioned about joining. If any of you guys, right, Reed, if you join, £1.99 a month, right? If you join, you get more updates and other stuff. So we do these classes on a Tuesday and a Wednesday. So we do these on a Tuesday and a Wednesday every week. But we don't, when I say 7:30, we don't usually start until probably about 7:40, 7:50. Some people are late, there's problems. Wednesday always starts at 7:30. So if you join us tomorrow at 7:30 on a Wednesday, be very welcome. Not next week, not this week, but next week on Thursday. We've got a session specifically looking at Welsh history and archaeology. So not this week, but next week. And we've got tomorrow morning, the last one at 11 o'clock. The last one tomorrow at 11 o'clock, looking at Barry history. And if anyone wants to make any donations, I'm doing what every other YouTuber does, right? Get me some donations over, right? Donate, get me buy me a coffee, they say. Buy me a coffee. So I'll chuck you a link. If anyone wants to buy me a coffee, and you can even chuck a donation through on there as well. And you can also chuck something over to PayPal if you're interested. Now, guys, it's over to you to ask me some questions before, it's showing that there's about 10 people online at this minute still listening to me. So if you guys, it says 6, but there's more than that. And if anyone got any questions they want to ask now, and what I might do is do some of my vegetarian pancakes after this as well. Should be good. And so, any questions, guys? Reese, it's been great having you along, and Carly, been great having you along. Anyone else out there, just say, Carly, what's all this stuff about Nineveh, Roman Persian Nineveh? The sea people are carefully hidden in that catch-all phrase. Yes. Anyway, anyone want to say anything else? And yes, some Welsh stuff for those that wanted to. Was it somebody asking about Welsh stuff? And let's say good night in Welsh. Nos dych chi, gwelwch chi eto. See you again, and gwelwch chi ar wythnos nesaf. See you next week. Anyway, Carly, it's been actually a delight, and good night. If nobody else wants to say anything else, then that's fine. Hopefully I've answered everybody's questions. So nos dar chi. I'll hang on here if Reese has got anything else to say. And yes, it's been good. It's been good. Oh God, I'm knackered now. So what I might do is have a cup of tea and a pancake, I think. Oh, my ram has been a pain in the backside. And I've got to get some face in. Sorry, when next specifically is there an Iron Age session? Right. Okay, yeah, Reese. My INA session is tomorrow, which is Wednesday, and that's at 7:30. So tomorrow there'll be a little bit more information in tomorrow's, which is developed from here. Most of today's we'll do tomorrow, but there'll be some other little bits and pieces. So next week, right, yeah, Reese, you want to know that's all, every single one of my lectures on a Tuesday and a Wednesday will be on the Iron Age. There'll be some other stuff chucked in. We've got to do the document from the Mole Cape that Margaret sent a donation for £200 over, which is so great. Do you know what it is to, thinking about getting a document costing 200 quid, thinking I can't afford this, whatever. And then somebody said, I'll give you money to buy it. And I'm thinking, oh my God, that is so good. And it's going to be so good because I'll get some screenshots. I'll get the printed to get, because I'm going to get some proper screenshots done of it. Because investment, we can do that, so that'll be good. So the mole cape stuff, but I know that's Bronze Age, but that'll be really good. So guys, right. Anyway, Reese, thanks for your support, and like as I say, don't forget to subscribe and like, and again, if you want to join, press the join button. Every penny helps, and any donations, you've got the links there. And my live show next year, we got 5 live shows next year. And the live shows next year are again, I'll put the link on there if anyone wants to look for details of the live show. The live shows next year will be looking at specifically Welsh history, and bits of Welsh history that are hidden, bits of Welsh history that people don't talk about. It's a bit like looking at the Iron Age, and people don't talk about lots of things from the Iron Age, but that's what we'll be doing. Anyway, so put the link for the live shows there. And Reese, if you want to come along to any of the live shows, the tickets at this minute are all £10. Chepstow, Ustrey Gunlice, Brecon, Abergavenny, and Lampeter, and all £10 each. So go on site and buy tickets now while they're still the price they are before they go up. And I know the shows are next year, but we're trying to get sales now to sort of so we know who's going in a way. Right, Reese, I'm going to call this a day. Thank you very, 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 very much for joining us. And Carly, it's been an absolute blast. Knackered now, absolutely knackered. And yes, got to put a line through that. So what have I got to do tonight now? Yeah, eat. I've got to get some metal zip ties for posts. Shocking. Okay, so done that. Right, okay, I'm done. I'm done tonight. So thank you very, very much. And I'm just gonna have a quick chat and look in this box again. As you guys know, I got an OCD about looking in this box. Were any hill forts built during the Roman occupation? I've answered that, but hill forts built during the Roman occupation are reused. Some whole hill forts, everything's flattened and stuff, and they're reused for some farmsteads in areas, but lots of the hill forts are completely abandoned. So yma o'r hyd, diolch yn fawr chi, and oh yeah, a bit more Welsh. If anyone learning Welsh, dydd Llun, dydd Mawrth, dydd Mercher, dydd Iau, dydd Gwener, dydd Sadwrn, dydd Sul, ac dim siarad Cymraeg now. Siarad Cymraeg yn y Saesneg. Thank you. Diolch yn fawr i chi. I'm off now. Night. Bye. Bye, 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 bye. And again, having people putting stuff in the box. Were any hill forts built during the Roman occupation? Again, still thinking about the question. Anyway, thank you guys. Thank you. Like and subscribe. Right. Gone.